I want to start off by saying this is simply for fun, so don't take this video too seriously. I'm not even sure if half of the decisions I make here would be accurate to canon. In my opinion, ONC has taken all of the wrong methods to keep the drama in the show throughout the season. From the Anarissa tiebreaker, to the Zaid betrayal, to the Jade and Logan debate, it's all felt artificial. So I wanted to see what would happen if I took the most organic rivalry this season has and dragged them all the way to the jury vote with intense, yet possibly reasonable plot armor. This video is completely improv, meaning I don't have any pre-written notes in the making of this video. The production of this video started before the finale, and I'm not sure when it will come out, but I don't plan on playing out the final two, so don't expect that. Going into this, I'm completely unaware of who would be in the finale with Anastasia and Lynda. All I know is that the plan is to make Anastasia and Lynda reach the finale. With all of that out of the way, we can start the video. The season starts off mostly the same up until Marissa's first elimination. This is the point of the game that persuaded Anastasia to turn on Lynda. Lynda chose to work with Spencer, Logan, and Richard to eliminate Marissa to spite Anastasia for dismissing her contribution to the team earlier that episode. Many think this wasn't a smart move, and that was only verified by Lynda's following elimination fiasco. But this time, I have Lynda target Natalya instead. First off, Natalya going home still weakens the girls' alliance as a whole. Secondly, she's aware that regardless of what she does, Marissa's still going to be very trusting of her, and therefore she'd end up getting away with this, especially since Natalya was expendable anyways. Lynda easily persuades Spencer, who isn't fond of Natalya, and Richard, whose bond with Natalya isn't as strong as it became in canon due to their alliance still being in early development. Logan is only convinced by Spencer as he was in canon, since he'd never listened to Lynda. This leads to a 4-3 vote against Natalya. Marissa and Anastasia immediately clocked that it was Lynda who flipped. Natalya curses out Lynda and Spencer before she leaves, wishing everyone else luck, even despite Logan and Richard voting for her. The following episode, Lynda talks to Anastasia and Marissa about the last vote. Anastasia rips Lynda a new one, while Marissa tries to reason with Lynda. Lynda swears to them that she won't betray them in the next vote. Anarissa has a separate conversation where Anastasia tells Marissa she thinks Lynda is bluffing yet again, while Marissa fully believes Lynda's being sincere this time. This causes actual tension between the couple as they fail to come to an agreement on the situation. Anastasia loves Marissa enough that she does agree to trust her judgment, but she plans on having a backup plan in case things go south, as she's expecting. I don't think Marissa's presence over Natalya's changes the outcome of the challenge. Lynda still insists on taking charge in the cooking, therefore doing horribly, and the red team wins immunity. Lynda and Richard still have their heart-to-heart conversation, which Anastasia notices this time, and forms a plan to prove to Marissa that Lynda will never actually work with them. The girls come together, and Anastasia says their target tonight is Richard. Both girls agree. Anastasia pays close attention to Lynda, hoping to see any signs of hesitance, only to find none. Not to fret, though, because she already has a backup plan. Anastasia goes to Spencer and is able to stroke his ego enough to where he's persuaded to vote for Richard. For starters, losing Richard and Natalya would mean Spencer has Logan's loyalty all to himself, which he'd need at a time like this. And secondly, assuming the vote is a 3-3 tie as expected, Spencer could always blame the flipping on Lynda since she has a history of doing just that. So he thinks no matter what, he's in the clear. When at the elimination ceremony, Anastasia does still use her extra vote advantage. Her idea is that Lynda votes with the guys, while she still has Spencer's vote, making it a 4-3 against Richard, and proving to Marissa that Lynda is a snake that won't work with them. Spencer also finds this outcome beneficial, since a 4-3 vote only strengthens his chances at clearing his name behind Lynda flipping, since he's also convinced Lynda will vote with Logan and Richard. However, when the votes are revealed, 2 votes are red for Anastasia, and 4 are red for Richard. The voting stops there, which Anastasia asks for clarification on the last vote, since she's convinced that Lynda did in fact vote for her. But when Trevor does confirm that the final vote was for Richard, that clarifies a 5-2 vote against Richard. This shocks everyone. Spencer didn't know Lynda would actually flip. Anastasia was fully expecting Lynda to vote against her with the guys. Marissa didn't know Spencer voted with her alliance, and Logan and Richard didn't know they were going to get betrayed by their entire team. Lynda explains in a confessional that she was going to vote with the girls the entire time. She knew Anastasia had an advantage, but she didn't know what it was, so she had to cement herself in Marissa's eyes to ensure she isn't targeted anytime soon. Logan is upset with Spencer for eliminating Richard, which Spencer tries to defend himself, but is left with yet another strained relationship. Meanwhile, despite being upset about the betrayal, Richard still goes out in good sportsmanship, congratulating Lynda on her gameplay. Of course, Derek does reveal the twist at the end, in which Richard might have a chance to remain in the game if he wins the tiebreaker in the next episode. Logan is pleased with this, and Richard says he'll see them all later. The blue team is in complete disarray. Logan and Spencer have tension from the betrayal of Richard. Anastasia and Marissa have a bit of tension because Anastasia did agree to trust Lynda and still chose not to, and Lynda's just pleased she managed to make Anastasia waste her advantage. Marissa's presence should give them an advantage in the challenge. However, because of all of the drama and disorganization, like in canon, they don't even win a single round, and the red team takes immunity yet again. Now this vote is more interesting. Because Lynda kept up her end of the bargain last round, Marissa would be convinced she's actually a formidable ally and continues to try telling Anastasia that. Anastasia finally caves, since she knows the target is Spencer anyways, and she couldn't be bothered to save him of all people. Despite being upset with Spencer, Logan can't bring himself to vote for him. However, he does avoid him for just a bit. But now it's no longer just because of the Richard vote, but also because of his feelings for him. Logan's vote lands on Lynda by default. Spencer's vote also lands on Lynda, solely to save himself, and he'd assume Anastasia is voting for Lynda anyways. But it's a 3-2 vote against Spencer, sending him to the tiebreaker against Richard. Richard chooses Logan as Spencer's partner, and Spencer chooses Lynda as Richard's partner. Both pairs have a bit of a story to tell during the tie. Spencer has to apologize to Logan for betraying him by voting for Richard. He does admit to him that the game is still a big factor on his mind, but he does really care for Logan as a friend. Being the softie he is, Logan does forgive him by the end of the tie. Lynda also apologizes to Richard for what happened at his elimination, admitting she found herself in a bit of a rough position and had no choice. She should have warned him of the advantage ahead of time. Richard holds no grudges and solely focuses on winning the tie. Despite giving it their all, the losers end up being Richard and Lynda. Logan wraps Spencer in a hug, while Lynda and Richard also hug and wish each other luck. Richard congratulates Logan and Spencer for besting him and once again leaves with dignity. Due to Marissa's presence over Natalia or Richard's, as well as Logan and Spencer's minor issue being resolved, the blue team is able to pull through for this challenge, and the red team's elimination remains the same going into the merge. I'm not going to talk about Rescue Island in detail because it's not as important, but I will mention new plots that might happen with the presence of new pre-mergers. Natalia and Alessio's dynamic starts off and fleshes out in this episode. Richard and Ted get along. Richard also becomes the overall father figure of the camp. Richard acts as support for Diego in his emotional battles. Richard and Natalia's dynamic fleshes out here. Natalia and Ivy probably vibe. Natalia definitely has a scene or two fangirling over being in the same vicinity of Emily, and I can see the two ending off with a positive dynamic. And the pre-mergers plus Emily have the same. Good feels finale to the episode as in canon. Of course, until it's revealed there will be two returners. Going into the merge, I'm unsure if the girls' alliance would be reformed for many reasons. First off, Natalia is gone now, and she was part of the reason it was reformed in the first place. I can also see Natalia's absence playing a role in Isabel's dynamic with the other girls as well. Also, with Marissa and Anastasia going into the merge as a potential couple, as well as Anastasia and Lynda's rivalry, I honestly think Anastasia would have wanted the merge to start so she can leave the girls' alliance. When it comes to the challenge, Hannah and Benji remain a pair, and Spencer and Logan remain a pair. Without Natalia, Isabel pairs with Jade, who doesn't have Richard, so it works out. Anastasia and Marissa very obviously pair up together, which means Lynda and Zaid are left to work together. Anastasia and Marissa discuss the girls' alliance, in which Marissa wants to expand it because it's currently 6 girls to 4 guys, whereas Anastasia wants to leave it because she still doesn't have the best opinion of Lynda. They don't have much time to talk about it, but they aren't happy with the differing opinions. Meanwhile, Lynda talks alliance with Zaid, saying they seem to have one thing in common. They were excluded from their former teammates, and they could really pull off something impressive here. Zaid agrees to this. The only truly notable thing in this challenge is Logan nearly dying. One thing I've noticed in canon is that Natalia had to tell Isabel to go help Logan, rather than Isabel wanting to do so herself. This implies that Isabel would have completely ignored the issue if it weren't for Natalia. This means with Jade wanting to focus on the challenge, and Isabel wanting to focus on the challenge, the two ignore the situation to win immunity. I don't see Lynda being selfish enough to allow Logan to die to win immunity, as she's petty, but not that petty. And even if she didn't want to, Zaid is the one in the water, so he'd probably search for Logan anyways. The outcome ultimately ends with Logan being saved by Spencer, and Isabel and Jade winning immunity. They also choose Lynda and Zaid to have their rewarded items. Lynda's item is probably a photo of her family. Now the votes are interesting. With the girls' alliance not being regrouped, the boys wouldn't also make a pact. That gives Zaid free rein to target Benji. Isabel pulled him and Anastasia aside in canon, so I imagine she does so, but with Lynda now. Hannah and Benji discuss targeting Spencer, since it's Logan with immunity this time and not Spencer. They try racking up votes, but only manage to get Marissa's, since Anastasia wants to target Lynda and Marissa wants to save her. Logan and Spencer's votes are interesting because they did target Anastasia in canon, but solely because they needed to go after a girl in the girls' alliance. I'm not so confident that they'd vote her now that the girls are not aligned. I could see them voting Lynda though, since Logan would want to, and Spencer would want to keep Logan as an ally at all costs. This makes it a 4-3-3 vote between Spencer, Lynda, and Benji, but Benji still goes home. Hannah is outraged like in canon, but Benji takes his exit peacefully. Lynda and Spencer wouldn't ignore the target on their backs and work to clear their names in the future. With the absence of Natalia, I can see Hannah talking to Marissa about what happened last night, since she knows for sure Marissa didn't vote for Benji. Marissa wouldn't be able to give the same advice as Hannah, but she would provide comfort for Hannah, and the two bond over this. Spencer and Jade's mini rivalry would start a bit earlier since Spencer got a few votes last ceremony, and Jade just barely kept him afloat without putting any actual effort to do so. When it comes to the challenge, Marissa and Lynda are in place of Natalia and Richard, although I don't see either of them doing to Spencer what Natalia did, so only Hannah is taken out in the first part of the haunted house. When the remaining groups split, Logan and Spencer go off together, Isabel, Jade, and Lynda go together, and Anastasia, Zaid, and Marissa go together. Logan and Spencer go through the same thing, and Isabel, Jade, and Lynda go through the same thing. However, there would actually be a scene of the rat fight this time with Anastasia, Marissa, and Zaid. There would probably be an Anarissa kiss in the midst of this just to feed the shippers LOL. I do think Marissa does get taken out during this as well, meaning the same 4 survivors go into the last part of the challenge. Now that Zaid isn't aligned with Anastasia, he wouldn't have a reason to attack Spencer to save Isabel. There could be a debate that he still does, but Spencer would already think to form a guys' alliance to take advantage of the divide between the girls, so he reminds him of who eliminated Ivy, which is enough to convince Zaid to stand back. And with that, Spencer likely wins immunity this time. I don't think Isabel needed it anyway, but Spencer definitely did. The vote is now even more interesting. First off, Spencer does manage to get the guys together, despite what happened with Logan. Anastasia and Marissa have a proper conversation about their dynamic, and they agree to officially become a couple, but they also talk about the game. They agree to actually vote together tonight, and not lie to each other anymore. Zaid and Lynda come together, and Zaid tells Lynda who the guys are targeting. Lynda has a different target in mind, Marissa. She's noticed that she's started to stray away from her lately, and she has to cut her while she still can. Zaid does share with her the Anastasia kiss, which only gives her even more reason to target them. Lynda and Zaid talk to Isabel and Jade about the vote and share their target. Later on, Hannah also talks to them, to which they share with her that the target is Marissa. However, Hannah just bonded with Marissa, and she refuses to once again lose another friend after she just lost Benji. With both Spencer already wanting to talk to Anastasia about the upcoming vote, plus Hannah wanting to warn them about them being targeted, they all eventually learn that they only have one major target in mind. With a 5-4 vote between Jade and Marissa, it's Jade that takes the fall. This completely throws her off, as well as Isabel. Hannah basks in the glory of finally getting justice, even if it's not from who she initially wanted it to be. Spencer does the math and realizes it should have been a 6-3, and someone must have flipped. Marissa also does the math and realizes Lynda must have voted for her. She'd be upset that after everything she's done for Lynda, the same grace hasn't been regifted. In the end, Isabel and Jade have a peaceful farewell, and Jade and Spencer even have a somewhat solid outro as well, with Jade respecting Spencer's play. Logan and Spencer have their talk like they do in canon, and they end off on a friendly note. Zaid does approach the two conveniently afterwards, and admits to flipping on the vote, but not out of malice. He warns the two about Marissa and Anastasia being a couple, saying if there's anything he's learned, it's that a couple is a huge threat in the game. Logan and Spencer now feel relieved with where they left off, and agree to target Anastasia next. The next day, when it comes to the rejoin challenge, here's how the pairs go. Spencer goes first for winning immunity last round, and he chooses Diego like in canon. Isabel would choose Natalia now that Natalia is eliminated. Anastasia chooses Ivy like in canon. Zaid chooses Tristan like in canon. Logan chooses Richard like in canon. Marissa chooses Jade for lack of better options. Lynda chooses Ted in the hopes that she can bring him back as an ally. And Hannah chooses Amelie since she hasn't seen her in a while. Benji and Alessio would be alone. Ivy would still throw the challenge for herself and Anastasia to give Tristan and Zaid a chance for spotlight. Richard and Logan also do just as bad as in canon, and now that Benji is alone, he probably does worse in the challenge. So the same three people are out first. During the tightrope, Amelie, Hannah, Diego, and Spencer do well like in canon. Lynda actually helps Ted this time since she wants him back in the game, and I can see Isabel and Natalia taking the fourth spot. This means Jade, Tristan, and Alessio are out by this. In the final stretch, the players lose their partners, and it comes down to Diego, Amelie, Natalia, and Ted. There's no evidence that proves that Natalia or Ted would be good at juggling, and even if I took their other skills that could possibly translate to it, they don't have any. So because one of them actually won in canon, and the other came extremely close, by default I have to bring back Diego and Amelie. Diego and Spencer still have their talk at the end of the episode, and Hannah is happy to see Amelie, though conflicted with the game itself. Isabel is pissed to not have Natalia back, and Lynda is pissed to not have Ted back. In canon, during the motel episode, we learned that Diego and Spencer agreed on giving each other space, which I can see still happening here to avoid anything messy. Instead, I see Diego hanging out with Hannah and Amelie. Although I will say the only time Spencer and Diego have a direct interaction would be to introduce Diego to the guys' alliance. I'm not exactly sure how he'd react to being part of this, but he likely accepts it to have numbers, since he'd want to be more strategic this time around. Hannah is shocked to have gone from a vulnerable state in the game to possibly a majority position due to both Amelie and Diego's return. I can also see Isabel noticing this as someone who can be strategic. I honestly don't feel like going through the entire challenge, so I'm just going to give the immunity to Logan by default since his aquaphobia keeps him from allowing himself to fall. There isn't really anything notable to mention here anyways, since Logan already had Spencer vote off Richard, and that plot is long gone. Maybe something between Spencer and Diego could happen, but I see them both being respectful enough to not cause more drama between them. The upcoming vote is rather interesting because Hannah would definitely want Spencer gone. I can see Marissa wanting the same, and since the two are aligned, they try to get the votes against them. Meanwhile, the guys try to get Diego to convince Hannah and Amelie to vote with them, since that's the current strongest link between the guys and the girls. This leaves Diego in a tricky situation as he could cut Spencer or save him, and he doesn't know which option is better for his game. In the end, I do think it's a 7-3 vote against Spencer, with Diego voting him off solely for strategic reasons. The two do end off on a good note, as well as Spencer and Logan. Hannah is happy to have finally eliminated him. The game gets a bit tricky from here because Hannah is close to Diego, Anastasia is close to Logan, and Lynda is close to Zaid, meaning the guys are no longer easy votes. The girls are getting tired of each other anyways, especially with Anastasia still being here as a couple. With Spencer gone, Anastasia once again has her eyes set on eliminating Lynda, and Marissa is actually tempted to follow through with it now. However, Lynda and Isabel has made an agreement of their own to take down Anastasia and Marissa, since they're a couple. The guys' alliance has to work together now more than ever, but Diego still has a bit of a moral dilemma with Hannah also being here, especially since he'd also noticed how she's changed just as Amelie did. The auction only has 3 very notable offers, so I'll just talk about those. When betting on the video from home, I believe Marissa still gets it like in canon. When betting on the advantage, I can see it being between Anastasia and Lynda, with Lynda winning thanks to Isabel's extra money. And since Marissa already spent hers on the video, Anastasia wouldn't have enough. When betting on the immunity, I imagine Hannah still gets it over maybe Anastasia as the other bettor, which means Hannah is still immune from tonight's vote. When it comes to the vote, Anastasia would have the same idea as in canon, viewing Lynda as a threat due to the advantage. She tries getting votes from Isabel and Logan. Logan would be down, but Isabel would insist they target Hannah's trio first. Despite Isabel's hesitance, Anastasia goes to Hannah for votes, to which Hannah wouldn't mind eliminating Lynda at this current moment. Meanwhile, Isabel warns Lynda of her being targeted by Anastasia. Lynda would hate to use her advantage just as she got it, so she goes to Zaid for help. Zaid informs the guys, who are now divided. Zaid doesn't want to cut Lynda, and Logan doesn't want to cut Anastasia. Diego is unsure of who to side with this time, especially since he knows betraying the guys again would mean he loses their loyalty. Diego goes to Hannah, who wants Lynda gone. However, he tries steering her vote towards Isabel, who's his only option to ensure he doesn't lose any allies at this current moment. Now Hannah has no clue who to vote with. Looking at her options, the Anastasia and Lynda rivalry keeps votes off of her, so it probably is best to keep them both in the game. But she can't cut Isabel yet, since she's still in belief that Isabel is a close ally of hers. This leaves her vote on either Logan or Zaid. At the elimination ceremony, the vote goes in many different ways. Lynda and Isabel vote for Anastasia. Anastasia and Marissa vote for Lynda. Zaid and Logan vote for Isabel per Diego's request, but Diego, Hannah, and Amelie vote for Zaid, eliminating him. This is probably very confusing because I didn't explain it well, but let me elaborate. Hannah does get Diego to vote for Zaid since he does have a secure alliance in her and Amelie, and she convinces him that the guys are only holding him back. Diego, being desperate to focus on the game, agrees. Zaid is shocked and upset, as is Lynda, but the votes are final. Zaid leaves bitterly like he does in canon, and Logan feels as if he can't trust Diego after this vote. Going into this episode, the Anastasia rivalry builds back up due to both of them receiving a handful of votes last episode. Diego and Logan have also hit a rough patch with distrust between them, though it doesn't really have a lasting impact since they're both generally nice people. When it comes to the challenge, I also don't really want to go into full detail here, not only because it's too complicated, but because I doubt the newcomers would change the outcome, so Hannah still wins immunity here. This also means I'm pretty sure the events of the vote remain the same as well, with everyone targeting Isabel by Anastasia's command, and Isabel getting Lynda to work with her tonight, who agrees with no hesitation. Isabel uses her idol as she votes Marissa and Lynda votes Anastasia, causing the Anarissa tiebreaker. It goes down just as it does in canon, and by the end of it, both Isabel and Lynda are outcast by the mergers. One thing I want to clarify beforehand is that this time around, it would have been Marissa who told Lynda about voting for Isabel, meaning Lynda would warn Isabel. That means Logan is no longer in the limelight for betrayal. Anastasia would be discouraged over Marissa's elimination like in canon, which Isabel and Lynda would be a bit happy about. This time it's Logan who tries to reignite her fire now that he isn't guilty of putting it out. Meanwhile, I can imagine Diego being a part of this as well, but probably takes Zaid's place in telling Isabel and Lynda off. Lynda remains unfazed, but Isabel starts to rethink her decision. When it comes to the challenge, I can see Logan taking Zaid's place and bringing Anastasia back to her normal self again. Hannah and Amelie also make amends here like in canon. As for who wins, Diego is the most social of them all and could likely take immunity here. As for the vote, Anastasia and Isabel recognize that the numbers are heavily favored for Hannah and are able to put their differences aside for once to get Logan and Lynda to vote for Amelie due to Diego being immune. With a 4-3 against Lynda, Amelie is eliminated. Hannah is upset to have her get eliminated again, but Amelie leaves with dignity and wishes Hannah luck. I completely forgot to talk about Logan's aquaphobia arc, mostly because it doesn't exactly matter that much, but it does get resolved as it does in canon, only this time with the help of Diego. I do think this makes their bond stronger from this point on. I see Anastasia wanting to take advantage of Hannah losing Amelie, and Diego getting close with Logan to her advantage to form an alliance with Hannah. This marks 3 duos in the final 6. When the challenge happens, the duos are Anastasia and Lynda, Isabel and Diego, and Hannah and Logan. I think like in canon, Anastasia and Lynda win immunity as the duo who would be least likely to win. I also need to find an excuse as to how they don't get eliminated here. With Anastasia and Hannah together, and Lynda and Isabel together, Diego and Logan are the deciding votes. Of course, the decision isn't actually that hard to make since Diego is close to Hannah and Logan is close to Anastasia. But Lynda and Isabel are prepared for this. At the elimination ceremony, Lynda uses her steal a vote advantage on Anastasia, making her incapable of voting for this round. Of course, this can only cause a tie between Isabel and whoever Isabel and Lynda vote for, which I would predict to be Logan, per Lynda's request. Of course, I have no clue what tiebreaker would be put here, but I'm just going to go with the more interesting outcome anyways and say Isabel wins and Logan loses, sending him home. This upsets Diego and the others, but they can't change what happened. Of course, at the end of this episode, the jury vote is revealed, causing Anastasia to shift gears in terms of strategy, as well as a few others. With all due honesty, I'm convinced the jury vote is all that is needed left to confirm Anastasia and Lynda survive to the final 3. All that I need to do now is determine which of the other 3 would make it to the final 3 as well. Since I'm getting lazy, I'm going to keep this as short as possible. Everyone has the same roles in this challenge, with Lynda taking Jade's as the sorcerer and Diego taking Logan's as the knight. Isabel and Lynda would be taken out first in the challenge like Isabel and Jade in canon. The lack of the Zaid betrayal takes away the drama in the last part of the challenge, but that could easily be replaced by Hannah and Diego being the biggest jury threats and wanting to win immunity so they aren't voted off because of it. Given that they are friends, it could make it very dramatic. I do see Diego coming out on top and winning immunity solely from a physical aspect. And in canon, despite Isabel and Jade being a duo, they were willing to ignore that to eliminate Anastasia, so I could see the same happening for Hannah. With no advantages to play, in a 4-1 vote, Hannah does go home here. She does end off on a good note, being relieved to have finally ended the game after a long season of pain. At the final 4, this challenge is actually pretty detailed to talk about, but given the Isabel and Lynda duo, I see Anastasia and Diego having no choice but to work together against them. I don't exactly know who would win immunity here, but I'm going to go with the option that would be the most interesting here, and that is Lynda, and I'll explain why it's Lynda. The reason why Isabel and Lynda even started working together was to go against Anastasia. So with Anastasia as a viable option to vote, this gives them the dilemma of voting off the person they wanted gone for the longest or the jury threat, Diego. And Anastasia and Diego would approach Lynda to talk her into turning against jury threat Isabel, since at least Diego was a returner, so he doesn't know the merging cast as well as Isabel does, which makes him a less likely vote than her. This gives Lynda the prime position to either cause a tie against Anastasia or Diego, or to betray Isabel in the hopes that she can win a jury vote against Anastasia at a minimum. And knowing Lynda, she'd go for the latter option. This means in a 3-to-1 vote, Isabel is eliminated. And since she and Lynda haven't bonded as much as she did with Jade and Cannon, I see her actually being upset with Lynda and leaving on a negative note. I don't even have to talk about the semifinal challenge, since Diego has to win in order for the entire purpose of this video to work. Instead, I'll just get straight into the jury vote. I don't want to talk about all of the questions, but rather go over who's voting for who. I want to get the obvious ones out of the way first, and then go from there. Marissa is obviously voting for Lynda, since Anastasia is her girlfriend, so she'd never vote her off. Logan is also obviously voting for Lynda, since he and Anastasia got along much better, and Lynda is the main cause for his elimination. Spencer is voting for Anastasia, since he and Anastasia never really got along that well, and he and Lynda actually worked together at one point. Zaid is also voting for Anastasia. Can and Zaid would have easily voted Lynda, but here Zaid actually got along with Lynda and not Anastasia, and even at his elimination, she still hasn't voted for him. Jade was a bit hard to read, since she hasn't actually gotten to know either girls this time, but I think she votes for Anastasia solely because she respects Lynda's game more. Benji was also hard to read, but despite Anastasia not really treating him the best, I can't see him preferring Lynda over her, especially given how Lynda also voted him off. Amelie was yet another hard-to-read person, given she's had her fair share of discourse with both girls, but I can see her voting for Lynda since the two canonically bickered more, and I could see that happening if Lynda was a long-term player. Isabel was probably the hardest read, even more than Hannah, but for suspense reasons I'm talking about her before Hannah. Isabel's had her issues with Lynda, as even before the recent betrayal she already didn't like Lynda before the team swap. However, they bonded over going against Anastasia, which is also a pretty recent occurrence, and Isabel was canonically shown to not only not hold a grudge against Jade for the betrayal, but even praise her for it. So for that alone, I can see Isabel voting for Anastasia. The score is 4-4, and with that out of the way, I can confidently say that I knew who Hannah was going to vote for before I knew who Isabel would vote for. There is no way that Hannah sides with Lynda after Benji's, Marissa's, Amelie's, and her own eliminations. This might have been obvious from a narrative standpoint, but Anastasia wins here. However, I can see a lineup in which Lynda could possibly win this vote, but it would require Ted and Richard on the jury. What do you think of this what if? Do you think it's inaccurate? Are there any details you want to know more about? I know I didn't explain it well in this video, so leave it in the comments if you want to know more. And also comment any what if ideas that you want to see go down. I'll be looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you in the next video.